Hey everyone, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. These decks have been determined using a variety of different sources to ensure you're getting the most accurate statistics available to help you climb that infinite ladder. Let's get started. The first deck we need to talk about today is Marvelous Hawk. Now this deck has been on top for a few weeks now. The major change is the addition of Shang-Chi over Mr. Fantastic, which has improved the win rate of this deck by a full percentage point, having it be the only deck at about 60% with a notable number of games. This deck continues to perform. Now, one thing of note with the release of Blob coming, Blob might have a very negative impact on Darkhawk based decks because naturally it absorbs the entire deck. So Darkhawk will just dwindle down to a 0. So be aware that this deck might kind of be getting sunlit, or sunset, I should say, because of the factor of Blob, especially when Blob is going to be really popular within its first week or two of release. So if you're going to get the time in, get it in there because this deck might not be the same when Blob comes out. Now, number 2, we have Annihilus by Night. What's interesting about Annihilus and basically every deck in this top 10 list is that so many of them are archetypes that simply get better with like Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night has proven to be one of the absolute best cards in Marvel Snap, to the point that wouldn't surprise me if the card does get nerfed or adjusted. For instance, maybe it goes down to a 3/1, because you still the +2 every time it bounces, but it takes away a full bounce. I mean, 2 power is just 2 power, but still, something has to be done because the card is so remarkable. This version of Annihilus by Night basically utilizes Annihilus with the core Sentry and Hood, and has the bounce-based shell, which is honestly performing so well, particularly against Loki. Then we go to Legion by Night, and I think you might see a bit of a consistent pattern here. A lot of things like Werewolf by Night, and here you have a little bit more of a control shell with that Darkhawk. Legion being utilized as well. Very similar to the other Bounce by Night and other by Night decks essentially, but still remarkably high win rate at 58%. I know it can be frustrating for some people to see that Werewolf by Night is pretty much everywhere, but again, these are the statistics. These are the decks that are performing the best, and Werewolf by Night and that kind of package is definitely one of the best performing archetypes in the game right now. So we probably have a couple more to talk about still, to some people's dismay. But I mean, one thing that does not have Werewolf by Night is going to be She-Not. This has been a very classic deck that seems to just always constantly perform. Mobius and Mobius has not come back into the meta, despite it being changed to a 3/3 from whatever the hell it was before with its on-reveal trash. But that gives She-Hulk some room to breathe, and naturally, when you have something like a Leech, which can be extremely frustrating against a lot of these decks that are trying to do these miracle-style turn 6 plays, you do get a lot of value. Now, you do have to be very wary with using magic if you're against someone using Snow Guard, or Legion is starting to make its way back in the meta, which can hard counter this deck, because if you skip turn 6 and they Legion, well, your limbo's gone, and that feels hella bad. So, She-Not 58%, still an absolutely fantastic deck, but still susceptible to a couple of the play patterns that are very common. Now, this is the traditional Werewolf by Night. It's actually slid down a little bit, but still at a 58% win rate. You do have the Maria Hill Nico combination. Quinjet's still making the top win rate versions of this deck, and of course, now the major splash here, which adds about half a percentage of win percentage, is going to be the Rogue. Because what we're seeing here is a lot of emphasis on the ongoing cards, specifically Miss Marvel, and especially when you go into the weekend and people have the Miss Marvel missions until the new season comes out, Rogue just feasts, right? So if you're watching this video on like Saturday or Sunday, you're going to want to keep Rogue in the deck. So Loki by Night continues to be an absolute phenomenal performer, and again, anything by Night seems to be doing very well. Then we have Marvelous Dinosaur. This is a deck where it has the Devil Dinosaur splash to the Miss Marvel package. Overall, a very similar style. The addition of Mystique here gives you the opportunity to Mystique both the Devil Dinosaur and the Darkhawks. You have some options from that perspective. You're not seeing as much as Zabu as you used to, but Zabu's still having a role to play in many of these decks. So yeah, this deck is pretty damn solid. I do like the addition of Coulson as well. So Coulson is finding its way into some more decks, especially when Devil Dinosaur is one of the things to consider. And then we have Destroy coming in at number 7 at 57%. This is as classic Destroy as it gets. We haven't had a major meta shakeup in a bit, so Destroy has kind of remained relatively consistent. Again, because Mobius and Mobius is not really part of the meta, Death is now back and a major player in these shells, which allow you to essentially get in that 57%. Right now, Destroy has the highest win rate it's ever traditionally have. It's often kind of like hovered around 54, 53%, and it's slowly started to climb, and this is about the highest I've ever seen it at 57%. That might be somewhat in point because of you are seeing some Annihilus, and obviously Destroy loves chewing on Annihilus pieces getting thrown over to the other side of the board. But ultimately, still a very capable deck and one that you can reliably take into Infinite Ladder. Number 8 is Discard at a 56% win rate. This is one that kind of fell off slightly in the last couple weeks, but now is starting to climb back up. 56% win rate is nothing to scoff at, although of course you do have some other decks that have higher win rates. But the thing about this deck that can be somewhat frustrating despite its relative power is that it has a very obvious line that allows your opponent to retreat. So this is one of those decks where you very infrequently get any more than 2 or 4 cubes. You have to snap really aggressively because your opponent can basically watch the Apocalypse tick up, and as you get into higher MMRs, your opponents will know that, like, hey, they drew their Chavez on 6, so they're gonna, you know, play Chavez, or, you know, Dracula the Apocalypse. Like, they know the play style and there's no surprises, which can be somewhat challenging for this particular deck, right? So 56% win rate, decent cube rate, but it's good to see that Discard is doing well. Now, this is one of my favorite decks in the game right now. It's Guardian's Lockdown. There's a couple different versions of this. This is the highest win rate version of it. There is a version that also cuts Echo if you don't have it, and includes something like a Nightcrawler, which can be valuable. But Echo, if you have it, is absolutely remarkable in this deck, especially considering the amount of ongoing cards you're seeing, because hell, Miss Marvel's in this deck, and you know Miss Marvel's everywhere else, and so is Professor X. And so what ends up happening is that if you're playing against someone in Conquest that has a Professor X style package, you're able to more confidently play Gamora when you know that, hey, they can't play that Professor X in the Echo lane or something like that, right? So a lot of value in this Guardian's Lockdown deck. It's one of my favorite in the game right now, and I feel like a skillful pilot can definitely pilot this above 56%. It has everything you need. Of course, it has the cringe cloud, but you know what? Alioth, especially when you're locking things down with either Storm or Professor X, its value is undeniable. So amazing deck, doing extremely well. Number 9 in the current meta. And finally, we have Bounce by Night. Before we get into this, it is worth noting that if you're not subscribed yet, maybe consider subscribing. I would appreciate it greatly if you find my content helpful. The vast majority of people that watch the videos aren't actually subscribed, which actually surprises me, is what I meant to say. But Bounce by Night. Now, this one here is a very traditional bounce-based deck. You do have Beast in it. You have the Bast. This is very much a disruption-style deck designed to destroy Loki. You're bouncing Korg, you're bouncing Black Widow, you're replaying them over and over again, you're sweeping them up with Falcon. It is so annoying. And then, of course, if they do have a collector that's getting chonky, you have this Shadow King. So this deck favorably trades against Loki, which is one of the reasons why it's doing pretty well into the current meta, but piloting it can be very tricky. Hope this guide helped you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.